Did you guys know that many humans were once members of the Banished faction in Halo? And in a way, for a moment, the faction actually brought peace to the galaxy. Welcome to the channel that covers the most interesting lore from various video games. In this video, we're going to look at the complete history of Atriox and the Banished in the Halo series leading up to the events of Halo Infinite. This story starts on May 28th in the year 2510. A brute would be born into the Covenant by the name of Atriox. The Covenant, for those of you that aren't aware, is the largest military organization in the galaxy at the time. It consisted of multiple species allied together in a unified force. When young Atriox became old enough, he would join the Covenant military. He was trained by his mentor Escharum, who would prepare him to join war against humankind. Atriox became a very skilled warrior and would become the rank of a brute stalker, which specializes in special ops missions such as reconnaissance and assassinations. Atriox himself was further trained by an elite blade master and given the role of hunting down Spartans, or demons as the Covenant called them. Late in the Human-Covenant War, the leaders of the Covenant were making some questionable decisions on the battlefield. They would command an initial attack on known UNSC positions of around 40 brutes to clear a path for follow-up attacks. The first wave of these attacks would nearly always be the pack that Atriox was part of, and they were treating them just like cannon fodder, sending them in the battlefield to die. Their main role was just to make it easier for follow-up attacks. This happened multiple times, and nearly every time Atriox would make it back as the sole survivor of the battle. Atriox would be sent out, watching members of his pack fall in battle, to return alone nearly every time, and after a while, he would become distinguished enough in the battlefield to assert his position as commander of these large groups. Over time, Atriox himself became a legend in the Covenant. Other brutes would talk about how he defied death over and over again in the battlefield, but all Atriox could think about were his fellow packmates, being pawns for the Covenant, just sent out to die. His resentment grew for the Covenant, especially for their leaders, the Prophets. The more he thought about the point of it all, the more angry he became. He never believed in the Covenant religion of the Great Journey, as they called it, and he also didn't really see the point in the genocide of mankind. To be honest, he actually thought the Covenant was cruel for acting in such a way against humans. In the year 2549, Atriox would be sent out yet again on another suicide mission with other brutes to occupy a human colony on planet Algolis. Again, Atriox would return back to base alive, but this time he caught the eye of a Sangeli, or elite, overseeing their group. This still takes place in a time when elites had authority over brutes in the Covenant. The lead elite had noticed that other brutes were looking up to Atriox and even admired him in a way. Worried that the brutes might start questioning their role in the Covenant, the elite spoke to the High Prophet of Truth through a remote communication device. He stated that Atriox was never meant to be alive this long, and a brute who lives to see so much might start losing loyalty in the Covenant. Truth, however, wanted to keep Atriox around since he was still a valuable tool to them. He stated he would sanction his elimination only if his lapse in loyalty was confirmed. The elite took this as an opportunity to find out for himself. He eased into conversation by complimenting Atriox and his abilities in the battlefield, but he would say it was nothing, he was just doing his duty for the Covenant. But further praise by the elite brought out his true feelings, stating that the death of his brothers didn't serve any purpose at all, and that he doubted that they had the same vision as the Covenant as well. He went even further and stated that he felt humans were severely underestimated, and that maybe blind loyalty isn't the way it should be. All this was reported back to the Prophet of Truth, who then decided Atriox was more dangerous than he had thought. He wanted him to be killed off, but he said it had to be done delicately, so that it didn't start an uprising among the other brutes. Before long, Atriox found himself on another Phantom, which is a Covenant transport ship, heading into the next battle like many times before. This time, however, he noticed a peculiar brute on the ship staring at him, and they locked eyes just before jumping out right outside a UNSC compound where the battle was taking place. This time around, Atriox also had more eyes on him than usual. The elites that looked over their pack were watching Atriox closely through a remote device called Sandshroom Eyes, essentially a Covenant surveillance drone. They were hoping this would be the battle that Atriox would fall, but as the fighting went on until the Covenant won, Atriox at this point noticed a wounded Marine that was still alive in the rubble. He looked at the young man and told him to run. Atriox lazily followed the stumbling man and at the same time proclaimed his hate and frustration for the Covenant before killing him. As Atriox turned around, there standing was the brute that locked eyes with him in the Phantom ride over. The brute challenged his opinion of the Covenant, calling it blasphemy. Atriox dared the accuser to fight him. Atriox would only take a single hit in the fight and strike down the brute that challenged him. This time when Atriox returned to base after the fight had been won, he found himself surrounded by elites, led by their commander who was there to be Atriox's executioner. The prophets used the murder of his fellow brute as an excuse to sentence him to death. Atriox handed over his gravity hammer and dropped to his knees. It appeared as if he was just accepting his fate. When the plasma blood blade was thrusted towards his face, he quickly stopped it with only his right hand and told everyone present to watch what happens next. As Atriox rose to his feet, he impaled the executioner with his own sword. The surrounding elites drew their swords, but the nearby brutes who had been watching from a distance were inspired by Atriox's defiance, and together they slaughtered the elites surrounding him. The brutes then knelt down and howled for Atriox. Then and there, they would all commit to follow his lead as the new group known as the Banished was born. The early days of the Banished consisted of attacking and raiding the Covenant for supplies since they were now self-reliant. Their main goal starting off was just to build up their arsenal. The group at this point was mostly brutes along with grunts who were previously assigned to them. It wasn't long before the UNSC also became a target for these attacks, and Atriox would become a known target among humankind. The UNSC would prepare for attacks on the Covenant military camps, only to find the places already cleared out of weapons and vehicles, and usually only a few dead Covenant. This was a clear sign to the UNSC that the Banished were recruiting. Now the Banished still had plenty of room for expansion, and they needed a leg up on the Covenant. Atriox sent out Decimus, his second in command, to the planet Atriox to speak to a jackal scientist in hopes of persuading her to join them. Her technology could rise the Banished into a new state of power. At first, she welcomed Decimus in showing him her inventions that allowed her to control the Yanmei, an insect-like species with pheromones. But next thing Decimus knew, she was using this technology against him, trying to take him out. Atriox, knowing this would happen, appeared from a high ledge, leapt down and crushed the Yanmei that were attacking Decimus. The scientist attempted to escape, but Atriox took her out in the process. Atriox, after hearing what the new technology could do, picked up the device and crushed it in his hands. He said controlling and using other species like a tool would make them no better than the Covenant. He made it clear that he wanted the Banished to follow him because they knew he would accomplish their goals, not because they were tricked or controlled into doing so. Right then and there, Atriox proved that he would stick to his core values and proved himself as a leader. Not long after this expedition, Atriox would hear of the greatest thing yet for the Banished, the Great Schism. We covered this more in detail on the Brutes video, but essentially there became a great division in the Covenant between Brutes and Elites, causing the Covenant to eventually fall apart and multiple sub-factions to form. Atriox would recruit numerous new members and gain mass amounts of supplies. He even convinced some members of an elite group known as the Silent Shadow to join the Banished, as they were in the middle of boarding his ship taking out his crew. Atriox was very persuasive, and the Banished sounded like a dream come true to many ex-Covenant members. The most powerful asset Atriox gained during this period was an assault carrier called the Enduring Conviction, and its entire crew. Atriox was first captured as a prisoner by them, but Atriox, having such a strategic mindset, was already 2 steps ahead with a hidden squad of brutes. They ended up capturing their shipmaster, Let Voiler, And at first he was a little reluctant, but he ended up agreeing to join the Banished since they promised plenty of resources, including fuel for the ship, which they very much needed at the time. Atriox used the Great Schism to recruit some of the most powerful elites and brutes in the galaxy. In a way, Atriox was almost bringing peace back between the many species. In fact, the Banished even spread word to human colonies, where many of them would actually join the Banished alongside Atriox. Now, with an immense arsenal of power, Atriox wanted to make bigger moves. So for context, the Ark is a location in Halo where the Halo arrays can be activated, and it has multiple portals linking nearly the entire galaxy. And without any warning, the portal linking the Ark to Earth had been shut down due to attacks on Earth from Cortana and her faction, the Created. You see, during this time, Cortana was convinced she needed to assume the mantle or responsibility over all other species, and she would use her guardians to threat anyone into submission. Atriox, however, took this as an opportunity to take the enduring conviction to the Ark in hopes of creating their own Halo ring. Atriox would set up mining operations on the Ark and mastered the portal system, using the Ark to further expand the Banished and its resources. The main goal of creating a new Halo would inevitably be crushed by the UNSC and their support carrier, the Spirit of Fire. This battle would also cost Atriox their ship, the Enduring Conviction. After months of battling with the UNSC and a few of their Spartans, Alice 130, Douglas 42, and Jerome 92, Atriox needed to do something to turn the tides. He sent his lieutenant Voridus and Pavium, who were brothers, to search through the wreckage of High Charity on the Ark. High Charity was once the mobile capital city for the Covenant before it became infested with flood. Atriox specifically ordered the brothers not to go inside. However, with no success after searching for a while outside the wreckage, they did just that. They entered the wreckage and found themselves face to face with spores and various forms of the flood who had been surviving in the wreckage for quite some time now. Atriox now found himself dealing with a brand new threat on the Ark, which took priority over the battle with the UNSC since the flood was far more dangerous. Atriox ordered the brothers and their crew to keep the flood contained to the wreckage, while also making it very clear he was displeased with their actions. The brothers managed to weaken the flood with explosives, and Voridus used this opportunity to go underground to activate the Forerunner flood defense system, while Pavium remained on the surface to hold the remaining flood back. The brothers would then have to turn their attention to the proto-gravemind commanding the flood before it reached its full form into a full-fledged gravemind. The brothers were ultimately successful, and Atriox spared their lives since they managed to resolve their own mistake with very little resources. However, redirecting the Banished troops to deal with the flood situation ultimately gave UNSC advantage over the Banished. The Banished, allied with a few other brute factions, opened a portal linking the planet Reach to the Ark, allowing Atriox to leave with his war chief Escharum. Atriox stated to his forces that were left on the Ark that he planned on returning with reinforcements. But just as fast as Atriox found himself out of one situation, he got into another. He would be given an ultimatum by Cortana, who contacted him over a hologram. She stationed one of her guardians at Doisac, the brute's homeworld, and suggested that he submit to her. He refused her offer, causing her to destroy Doisac entirely, which led to Atriox becoming furious. Not long after, Atriox would be successful in decimating Cortana's forces, and in retaliation he would seek out Master Chief, who at the time was on the UNSC supercarrier the Infinity, stationed just outside of Zeta Halo. He would defeat Master Chief one-on-one, throwing him into a pit and believing that he killed him. Now, the next events are still unclear, but we know of Atriox's absence in the events afterward. And in his absence, Escharum would command the Banished on Zeta Halo. Escharum, however, somewhat abandoned Atriox's core values and once again denounced humans as a species, imprisoning any current Banished humans. The story continues on Zeta Halo, where the Banished ally with the Harbinger in order to reactivate the ring and take out the UNSC. I covered these events in more detail in my video, The Origins of the Endless, but I hope you guys enjoyed the story of Atriox and the Banished and how they rose to power. If you did, consider leaving a like on the video and subscribing to the channel for more game lore. I will catch you guys in the next one, and as always, good luck and have fun.